someone is going to look for you soon, not because they miss you, but because they finally noticed the space you left behind. The room feels different. The dynamic has shifted. Something they cannot name, something they took for granted every single day, is gone. And when they come looking, when they reach out, when they ask around, when they send that message they have been rewriting for weeks, they will not find you. Not because you disappeared, but because the person they are looking for no longer exists. The man who said yes to everything, gone. The man who explained himself to people who were never listening, gone. The man who forgave without conditions, who gave without limits, who stayed in rooms where his name was only mentioned when something was needed. That man is gone. And in his place stands someone they have never met. Someone quieter. Someone heavier, not with sadness, but with substance. Someone who walks into a room and changes the temperature without saying a single word. They will try to find the old version. They will use the old tricks, the guilt, the nostalgia, the "you've changed" speech designed to make you feel like growth is betrayal. But none of it will work, because the man they are speaking to does not respond to those frequencies anymore. He has been recalibrated, in silence, alone, without their knowledge or permission. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who reinvented himself every night in the silence of his own journal, wrote something that reads like a warning to anyone who underestimates the quiet man. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. He understood that transformation is not an event, it is a saturation. It happens slowly, thought by thought, decision by decision, morning by morning, until the man who wakes up is fundamentally different from the man who once went to sleep in the same body. This video is about that transformation. Not the loud kind, not the social media kind, not the kind that announces itself with a new wardrobe and a motivational caption. The Stoic kind, the kind that happens underground, in darkness, in silence, and only becomes visible when it is already complete. If you have been quietly changing, and no one around you has noticed yet, then this is not a video. This is a mirror. And what you are about to see is the man you are becoming. Let us begin. Before something new can live, something old must die. This is not poetry. This is architecture. You cannot build a new structure on a foundation that was designed to hold a different building. The old foundation, the one built on people-pleasing, on fear of rejection, on the desperate need to be liked, cannot support the man you are becoming. It was not designed for that weight. It was designed for a lighter, smaller, more compliant version of you, and so it must go. But here is the part no one warns you about. The death of the old self does not feel like liberation. Not at first. It feels like loss, because the old self, as exhausting as he was familiar. You knew how to operate him. You knew his patterns, his reflexes, his scripts. When someone was disappointed, the old self knew exactly what to say. When someone needed something, the old self knew exactly how much to give. When conflict appeared, the old self knew exactly how to retreat. That predictability felt like safety, but it was not safety. It was a cage with comfortable furniture. Seneca understood this deeply. He watched men in Rome cling to identities that were destroying them. The senator who kept performing for a public that despised him. The merchant who kept chasing wealth that never satisfied him. The soldier who kept fighting wars he no longer believed in. And he wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested." The time you spent being the old version wasn't wasted. It was education. Every moment of overgiving taught you where your limits are. Every betrayal taught you what loyalty actually looks like. Every moment of silence that was forced upon you by rejection, by abandonment, by the slow realization that certain people were never going to see you, prepared you for the silence you now choose voluntarily. But the education is over. The semester has ended. And the man who enrolled, the one who walked into those lessons naive and unprotected, is not the man who is walking out. Epictetus was the living proof of this. He entered life as a slave, someone else's property, someone else's tool, and someone else's version of a human being. And he exited life as one of the most free men in history. Not because the world changed around him, because he killed the version of himself that accepted the world's definition. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The old you was not your master. The old you was a character you played because the script was handed to you before you knew you had a choice. The parents wrote some of it. The friends wrote some of it. Society wrote most of it. And you performed it, beautifully, convincingly, exhaustingly, until one day you looked at the script and realized, this is not my story. That realization, that single, silent, irreversible realization, is the death of the old self. And it does not require an announcement. It does not require a confrontation. It does not require anyone else's understanding. It only requires you to stop performing and start building. Every great transformation in nature happens in darkness. A seed does not become a tree in the sunlight. It becomes a tree underground, in the dark, in the dirt, in the pressure. The sunlight comes later. The leaves come later. The visible growth that everyone admires comes later. But the real work, the root work, the foundation work, the invisible architecture that will hold everything, happens where no one can see. This is your underground season, and it is the most important season of your life. The world will not understand it. They will see you go quiet and assume something is wrong. They will see you withdraw and assume you are depressed. They will see you stop attending, stop calling, and stop showing up to the places you used to go, and they will assume you are falling apart. Let them assume, because what is actually happening, what they cannot see, what they will only understand when it is already finished, is construction. You are building the internal architecture of a man who does not need external validation to know his own worth. You are laying the foundation for a mind that does not crumble when the world disapproves. You are growing roots so deep that no storm, no rejection, no betrayal, no loss will be able to move you. Marcus Aurelius spent 20 years in his own underground season. 20 years of writing alone at night, while the empire demanded everything from him during the day. 20 years of building an inner world that was stronger than the outer one. But when the result, the meditations, was never meant to be seen. It was root work, foundation work, the invisible architecture of a man who held an empire together by holding himself together first. He wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." That source of strength does not develop in public. It develops in the quiet mornings before anyone is awake, in the difficult conversations you have with yourself at midnight, in the decisions you make that no one will ever applaud, because no one will ever know about them. Seneca experienced his underground season on the island of Corsica, exiled, stripped of his status, his students, his influence. In Rome, he was one of the most powerful voices in the Senate. On Corsica, he was nobody. When in that nothingness, in the silence that exile forced upon him, He became something Rome could never have built. He became clear. He wrote during that exile, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." But that principle applies to far more than anger. The greatest remedy for a life built on other people's expectations is delay. A pause, a season underground where you stop reacting to the world and start designing the version of yourself that will eventually re-enter it. Your underground season is not a retreat. It is a laboratory. You are running experiments on yourself, testing which beliefs are yours and which were installed, testing which habits serve you and which serve others, testing which version of you survives when the audience disappears and the applause stops, and the version that survives, the one still standing when the noise is gone. That is the real one. That is the one worth building a life around. The hardest part of transformation is not the work. It is the invisibility of the work. When you go to a gym for the first week, nothing changes. Your body looks the same. Your strength is the same. The mirror shows you the same person who walked in on day one. And every voice in your head, every doubt, every impatience, every leftover habit from the old self, says the same thing. This is not working. But it is working. The change is happening at a level you cannot see yet. The muscle fibers are tearing and rebuilding. The neural pathways are forming. The foundation is being laid, invisibly, silently, without anyone's acknowledgement. Mental transformation works exactly the same way. When you start setting boundaries, the first week feels terrible. The guilt is overwhelming. The old patterns scream at you to go back, to apologize, to explain, to undo the distance you created. And nothing visible changes. The people around you still treat you the same way. The world still operates the same way. And you start to wonder if any of this is worth it. It is worth it. The change is happening underground. And the fact that you cannot see it yet is not evidence that it is failing. It is evidence that it is real. Because real change, the kind that lasts, the kind that restructures a man from the inside out, does not announce itself on day one. It announces itself on day 100. And by then, it is irreversible. Epictetus taught this with brutal honesty. His students came to him expecting immediate transformation, wisdom in a weekend, enlightenment in an afternoon. And he told them the truth. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That sounds simple, but practicing it, actually rewiring your reactions day after day in situations where the old pattern is screaming at you to respond the way you always have, is the hardest discipline a human being can undertake. Because the old reaction is automatic, it is fast, it is comfortable. The new reaction requires a pause, a breath, a conscious decision to override years of programming. And no one sees that pause. No one sees the breath. No one sees the moment you choose to respond differently instead of reacting automatically. It is invisible progress, the most important work you will ever do, and the most unwitnessed. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this in a way that suggests he struggled with the same impatience. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. That strictness, that daily, invisible, unrewarded discipline, is what separates the man who talks about change from the man who actually changes. One posts about transformation, the other practices it, alone, in silence, in the unglamorous minutes between waking up and walking out the door. Seneca put it even more directly. Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. The difficulty is the point. The discomfort is the point. The invisibility is the point. Because a transformation that requires an audience is not transformation. It is performance. And you are done performing. Now you are in the season of invisible progress, And the only person who needs to know it is working is you. There is an addiction that almost no one talks about. It is not chemical. It is not physical. It is psychological. And it controls more human behavior than any substance on earth. It is the addiction to recognition. The need to be seen. The need to be acknowledged. The need to have someone, anyone, look at what you are doing and say, "I see you. You are doing well. You matter." This addiction does not start in adulthood. It starts in childhood. It starts the first time you did something and a parent smiled. The first time a teacher praised you in front of the class. The first time a friend group accepted you because you said the right thing. From that moment on, your brain learned a lesson it never forgot. Recognition equals safety. Being seen equals being valued. External acknowledgement equals internal worth. And that lesson, that invisible, unspoken, deeply embedded lesson, is the operating system of the old you. Every time you explained yourself to someone who did not ask, that was the addiction. Every time you posted something and checked for likes, that was the addiction. Every time you did something good and felt empty because no one noticed, that was the addiction. Not a desire for connection, a dependency on being witnessed. The Stoics identified this as one of the most dangerous vulnerabilities a human being can carry, because a man who needs recognition can be controlled by anyone willing to provide it, and destroyed by anyone willing to withhold it. Marcus Aurelius, the most recognized man in the ancient world, fought this addiction every day. He had an entire empire applauding him, statues in his image, coins with his face, millions of people who knew his name. And yet he wrote alone, in a journal no one was meant to see, reminding himself that none of it mattered. He wrote, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself." That is not productivity advice. That is a man trying to break his own addiction to the external gaze. A man reminding himself, night after night, that the only audience that matters is the one inside his own mind. Seneca took this further. He described recognition as a form of debt. When you do something good and expect acknowledgement, you have placed yourself in debt to the other person's attention. And that debt compounds. The more you give expecting recognition, the more recognition you need to feel the same level of satisfaction. It escalates, it never ends, and it never satisfies. He wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future." The man addicted to recognition cannot enjoy the present, because the present is never enough without a witness. He is always projecting forward. When will they notice? When will they appreciate? When will the validation arrive? But the man who kills that addiction, who learns to do the work without the applause, to build without the audience, to grow without the acknowledgement, that man discovers something the recognized man never will: sufficiency. The feeling of being enough, not because someone told him so, but because he stopped needing to be told. This is what your underground season is teaching you. Not just discipline, not just boundaries, the ability to exist, fully, powerfully, peacefully, without a single person watching. If you are in your underground season right now, building in silence, changing without witnesses, becoming someone the world has not met yet, then you already know this channel was built for exactly where you are. Subscribe. We do not build in public here. We build in depth. When Seneca was finally recalled from exile, when Rome decided it needed him again, he walked back into the city as a different man. The Senate expected the old Seneca, the sharp rhetorician, the political player, the man who knew exactly what to say to move a room. They expected him to be grateful, eager, ready to reclaim his place in the hierarchy. But the man who walked back was none of those things. He was quieter. He was slower. He observed more and spoke less. He no longer seemed interested in winning arguments. He seemed interested in understanding them. He no longer sought the center of attention. He seemed comfortable at the edges, watching, measuring, deciding with surgical precision where to invest his words. This unsettled people. Because when someone you knew comes back fundamentally different, and you cannot identify what changed, it creates a dissonance that the human mind struggles to process. They look the same. They sound the same. But the frequency is different. The weight behind the words is different. The eyes hold something that was not there before. Seneca's exile taught him something that Rome, with all its power, all its wealth, all its noise, could never teach. It taught him that the most powerful version of himself did not need Rome, and a man who does not need the room, but chooses to re-enter it on his own terms, is the most unsettling presence that room will ever experience. This is the philosophy of coming back different. You do not return to prove anything. You do not return to show them what they missed. You do not return for revenge, for validation, for the satisfaction of watching their faces when they see what you have become. You return because you are ready. And readiness, true readiness, has nothing to do with their timeline. It has everything to do with yours. Marcus Aurelius modeled this every single day. He would retreat into his journal at night, into his inner exile, and then return to the empire every morning as a slightly different man. Not dramatically different, incrementally different, a fraction more patient, a degree more precise, a layer more detached from the opinions that used to control him. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He did not need Corsica. He did not need physical exile. He built his exile inside himself and visited it every night. And every morning he came back, different, not in a way the Senate could name, but in a way they could feel. This is what you are preparing for. Not a dramatic entrance, not a revenge moment, not a montage set to music, a quiet return, where the only thing that has changed is everything. And the only person who understands the full weight of that change is you. There is a version of you that still lives in other people's minds, and it is not who you are anymore. It is the version they created from the last time they saw you, from the last conversation they had with you, from the version of you that existed before you began this process. That version is frozen, preserved in their memory like an insect in amber. And every time they think of you, every time they talk about you, every time they expect something from you, they are speaking to the amber, not to the living, breathing, evolving man you have become. And here is what most people do not understand. You cannot update their version. You cannot sit them down and explain the changes. While you cannot present a PowerPoint of your growth and expect them to adjust their mental model, because people do not see what is in front of them. They see what they expect to see, and what they expect to see is the old you. This is why the return is so disorienting for others. They reach for the patterns they know, the guilt trip that used to work, the request that used to be granted, the emotional button that used to produce the reaction they wanted, and nothing happens. The button is disconnected. The pattern is broken. The machine they were used to operating no longer responds to the old inputs. Epictetus understood that other people's perception of you is the one thing you can never control, and the one thing you should never try to control. He taught, he who laughs at himself never runs out of things to laugh at. Applied here, it means, the version of you that lives in their head is their problem, not yours. Let them keep it. Let them argue with it. Let them miss it. Let them mourn it. You are not responsible for updating a file you did not create. Seneca practiced this with extraordinary discipline. When he returned to Rome, people tried to interact with the exile version of Seneca, the diminished one, the punished one, the one who should be grateful for being allowed back. And Seneca did not correct them. He did not argue with their perception. He simply behaved differently and let the dissonance do the work. Because here is the truth about transformation. You do not need to explain it. You need to embody it. The explanation invites debate. The embodiment creates fact. And facts, especially the quiet, undeniable, visible in every action kind, are impossible to argue with. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That is the identity funeral in one sentence. Stop explaining the new you. Stop defending the new you. Stop trying to reconcile the old you with the new you for the comfort of people who only knew the old version. Bury the old identity, not with anger, not with resentment, with gratitude for what it taught you, and finality because it has served its purpose. And walk forward as the man you built in the silence, without a eulogy, without an audience, without looking back to see if anyone is following. The old you was assembled. The new you must be architected. There is a critical difference. The old self was built by accident, by the random accumulation of experiences, influences, traumas, and social pressures that shaped you before you had the awareness to shape yourself. Your parents gave you certain beliefs. Your culture gave you certain expectations. Your pain gave you certain defenses. And all of it, none of it chosen, all of it inherited, became the blueprint for the man you were. But that blueprint was never yours. It was a collage of other people's needs assembled inside your body. And the reason the old self felt so exhausting, so heavy, so inconsistent, so prone to collapse, is because it was not engineered. It was improvised. The new self is different. The new self is intentional. Every belief is examined. Every habit is chosen. Every relationship is evaluated. Every reaction is designed, not inherited, not automatic, not left over from a version of you that no longer serves the man you are becoming. Marcus Aurelius was perhaps the greatest architect of the self in human history. Every night he reviewed his day, not with guilt, but with precision. What worked? What failed? Where his reactions served him and where they betrayed him. He was not journaling for therapy. He was engineering a human being, himself, the way a builder engineers a structure, with measurements, with standards, with the willingness to tear down what does not hold weight. Seneca provided the philosophical framework for this architecture. He wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those who you are capable of improving." That is not social advice. That is an architectural specification. It tells you exactly which materials to include in the new structure and which to reject. The people in your life are not decorations. They are load-bearing walls or they are dead weight. And the architect must know the difference, because a building that includes dead weight in its frame will eventually collapse. Epictetus added the foundation layer. He taught that the architecture begins with one distinction, the distinction between what you can control and what you cannot. Your thoughts, controllable. Other people's opinions, uncontrollable. Your morning routine, controllable. The economy, uncontrollable. Your response to betrayal, controllable. The betrayal itself, uncontrollable. He said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That distinction, drawn clearly, and practiced daily, applied ruthlessly, is the foundation of the new self. Because a man who wastes energy on what he cannot control will never have enough left to build what he can. Here is what the architecture of the new self looks like in practice. You choose your inputs, what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, who you spend time with. You design your mornings, not as a reaction to the day, but as a preemptive structure that sets the tone before the world has a chance to set it for you. You select your principles, not 20, not 10, but 3. 3 non-negotiable truths that guide every decision. And then you build, brick by brick, day by day, without showing anyone the blueprints. Because the man who shows his plans before the building is finished is the man who invites opinions into a process that requires only one voice, yours. How do you know when the change is real? Not when someone compliments you. Not when an old friend says you seem different. Not when social media responds to your new energy. Those are external signals. And external signals are the currency of the old self. The new self does not trade in that currency. The change is real when you pass the mirror test. The mirror test is not about appearance. It is about recognition. It is the moment you look at yourself in a literal mirror or in the reflection of your own decisions, and you do not recognize the man looking back, not because he is a stranger, but because he is the man you always wanted to be, and you realize he finally arrived. Marcus Aurelius described this moment indirectly. He wrote about the gap between the man the world sees and the man who exists inside the journal. For most of his reign, those 2 men were different, the public emperor and the private philosopher. But toward the end of his life, in his later writings, the gap narrows. The 2 men begin to converge. The public actions start to match the private principles. The external behavior becomes indistinguishable from the internal architecture. That convergence, that moment when who you are in public and who you are alone become the same person, is the mirror test. And it is the hardest test you will ever pass, because it requires total honesty. No performance, no adjustment for the audience, no version of yourself that only exists when someone is watching. Seneca tested himself constantly. He would review his day. Who did he pretend for? Where did he adjust his behavior to match someone else's expectation? Where was there a gap between what he said and what he believed? Every gap was a failure, not a moral failure, an architectural one. A crack in the structure that needed repair before it became a collapse. He wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Applied to the mirror test, this means the man you imagine yourself to be is often more impressive than the man you actually are. The imagination adds polish. It adds highlights. It removes the moments of weakness, the times you slipped back into the old pattern, the mornings you almost gave up. The mirror, the honest one, includes all of it. And the transformation is real only when you can look at all of it and still recognize the new man. Here are the markers. The change is real when someone disrespects you, and your first impulse is not to react, but to evaluate whether it deserves your energy. The change is real when you receive no recognition for something you did, and you feel complete anyway. The change is real when someone from your past reaches out and you feel nothing. Not anger, not nostalgia, not the need to prove how much you have changed. Just neutrality. Just peace. The change is real when you can sit in a room alone, no phone, no input, no distraction, and feel not emptiness, but fullness. When your own company is not a punishment, but a preference. When silence is not something you endure, but something you protect. That is the mirror test. And you do not pass it once. You pass it every day. Every morning is a new exam. And the man who keeps passing, quietly, without announcement, without applause, is the man who has genuinely become someone new. The moment your transformation becomes visible, and it will become visible, no matter how quietly you built it, the old world will react, not with admiration, not with pride, not with the acknowledgement you spent years craving, with resistance. The people who knew the old you have a vested interest in the old you's survival, not because they are evil, but because the old you was predictable. He was manageable. He fit into the role they assigned him, the reliable one, the kind one, the one who always said yes, the one who never made anyone uncomfortable with his growth. Your transformation disrupts their system. It forces them to confront questions they did not want to ask, about themselves, about their own stagnation, about the fact that you are evolving and they are not. And rather than face those questions, it is far easier to try to pull you back. They will do this in predictable ways. The first is nostalgia. Remember when we used to, a sentence designed to anchor you to a past that no longer exists. It sounds warm, it sounds loving, but its function is regression. It is an invitation to step backward into a version of yourself that you have already buried. The second is guilt. You've changed, said not as an observation but as an accusation, as if growth is betrayal, as if becoming better is a personal offense to the people who were comfortable with your mediocrity. The third is testing. They will push your new boundaries, gently at first, then aggressively, to see if they hold. They will make the old requests. They will trigger the old emotions. They will recreate the exact conditions that used to produce the old response, to see if the new man is real or just a costume. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily. Advisors who preferred the compliant version of him, senators who tested his patience, generals who pushed back against his measured responses, hoping to provoke the reactive emperor they could manipulate more easily. He wrote about this with characteristic calm. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. He did not fight the resistance. He did not argue with it. He simply continued being the man he had built, and let the resistance exhaust itself against his consistency. Seneca experienced the same pattern when he returned from exile. Old alliances expected old loyalties. Former students expected the former teacher. Rome expected the man it remembered, not the man Corsica had created. And Seneca navigated this with one principle. He did not explain the new self. He demonstrated it, consistently, patiently, without apology. He wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult. The most daring thing you will ever do is not the transformation itself. It is maintaining the transformation when the world is actively trying to undo it. That is where most people fail. They build the new self in isolation. But the moment they re-enter the world and feel the pull of the old patterns, the old expectations, the old versions of themselves reflected in other people's eyes, they fold. Do not fold. The pull is temporary. The resistance is temporary. The testing phase has an expiration date. And on the other side of it, when the old world finally accepts that the old you is not coming back, a new equilibrium forms. One where you are respected, not for who you were, but for who you have become. There will be a moment, and you will know it when it arrives, where you re-enter the world. Not with a speech, not with a grand entrance, not with any of the dramatic energy that the old self would have wanted. You will simply show up in a conversation, in a room, in a decision. And something will be different, not in the room, but in you. And people will feel it. They will not be able to name it at first. It will register as something subtle, a change in your posture, a shift in your eye contact, a weight behind your words that was not there before. And you will say less, but what you say will land differently. You will do less, but what you do will carry more. You will ask for nothing, and somehow receive more respect than the old you ever earned by asking for everything. This is the quiet return, and it is the most powerful moment in a man's transformation. Marcus Aurelius modeled this every morning. He emerged from his tent, from his nightly exile into his own mind, and walked into the chaos of empire. He did not announce his inner work. He did not tell his generals about last night's journal entry. He simply led differently, slightly, incrementally, in ways that the people around him could feel but not articulate. The quiet return works because it is not a performance. It is overflow. The inner work has filled you so completely that it spills into your external behavior without effort. You don't try to seem different. You are different. And the difference is visible in everything. The way you walk, the way you listen, the way you hold space without filling it with noise. Epictetus taught that the truest sign of a transformed man is not what he does, but what he no longer does. The man who has genuinely changed does not react to provocation, does not chase validation, does not explain his boundaries, does not justify his absence, does not perform his growth for an audience. He simply exists, fully, quietly, completely, in a way that makes the room adjust to him instead of the other way around. Seneca described the quiet return as the ultimate test of philosophy. It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who hankers after more. The man who returns quietly does not hank after recognition. He does not need the world to confirm what he already knows. He has been validated by the mirror, by the silence, by the months of invisible work that built a man the world has never met. And when the world finally meets him, when the quiet return happens in real time, the reaction is always the same. Confusion first, then curiosity, then a slow, reluctant, undeniable respect. The kind of respect that is not given because you asked for it. The kind that is extracted by presence alone. This is what you have been building toward. Not a moment of revenge, not a moment of proof, a moment of arrival, where the man you became in the darkness finally steps into the light, and the light does not change him, because he was already complete before anyone turned it on. The transformation is not the hard part. Maintaining it is, because the world does not stop testing you after the quiet return. The old patterns do not dissolve permanently after one successful boundary. The addiction to recognition does not vanish after 1 month of invisible work. These forces are patient. They wait. And the moment you relax, the moment you stop practicing, they return. This is why the Stoics did not treat philosophy as a belief system. They treated it as a daily practice, not something you understand once and carry forever. Something you do every morning, every evening, every time the world presents a situation that invites you to regress. Here is the practice. It has 4 parts. It takes 15 minutes. And it is the difference between the man who changed temporarily and the man who changed permanently. Part 1. The morning inventory. Before you speak to anyone, before you open your phone, sit for 5 minutes and ask, who am I today? Not who was I yesterday? Not who do they expect me to be? Who am I choosing to be in the next 16 hours? Choose 3 words. Not goals, words. Precise. Patient. Sovereign. Whatever your 3 words are, they become your operating system for the day. Every decision runs through them. Part 2. The midday checkpoint. Somewhere in the middle of your day, at lunch, during a walk, in a moment of stillness. Check in. Have I been the man I chose to be this morning? Where did I slip? Where did the old pattern show up? Not with guilt, with data. You are an engineer inspecting your own structure. Engineers do not feel guilty about cracks. They identify them and repair them. Part 3. The evening audit. Marcus Aurelius did this every night. Before sleep, review the day. Where did I hold the new self? Where did someone test my boundaries and I held firm? Where did the old self try to resurface? And did I catch it? This is not journaling for catharsis. This is quality control. You are ensuring that the man who goes to sleep tonight is the same man who woke up this morning, or better. Part 4. The weekly funeral. Once a week, pick a day, make it consistent. Identify one remaining pattern from the old self that survived the week. One habit, one reaction, one relationship, one way of thinking that belongs to the man who no longer exists, and bury it, deliberately, consciously, with the full understanding that you are not losing something. You are removing weight from a structure that needs to be lighter to rise higher. Seneca practiced a version of this nightly. He called it his evening review, a private accounting of the day's actions measured against the day's principles, not to punish himself, to calibrate. He wrote, "Each day a new life. Each day we die and are reborn. What matters is what we do today." The man who practices daily does not need motivation. He does not need inspiration. He does not need a video to remind him who he is becoming. He already knows, because he chose it this morning at noon tonight, and he will choose it again tomorrow. That is the difference between transformation and performance. Performance ends when the audience leaves. Transformation continues when no one is watching. And the man who continues, day after day, alone, in the quiet discipline of his own practice, is the man who will never go back to who he was. They will come looking for you. Maybe they already have. Maybe the message is sitting in your phone right now. Maybe the name you have not seen in months appeared on your screen last week. Maybe someone mentioned you to someone else, and the description they used was the old you, the version preserved in amber, the version they remember, the version they are comfortable with. But that version is gone, not hidden, not suppressed, not temporarily unavailable. Gone, dissolved in the silence you chose, burned in the discipline you practiced, buried in the underground season that no one witnessed. And in his place stands a man they have never met, a man who does not need their recognition to feel real, a man who does not need their approval to feel worthy, a man who built himself, alone, in the dark, without instructions, without applause, without a single guarantee that it would work, and came out the other side holding something they cannot take, himself. Marcus Aurelius built this man every night in his tent. Seneca built this man on a rocky island in the Mediterranean. Epictetus built this man while his leg was still broken and his body was still owned by another. They did not build him for the world. They built him for themselves. And the world had no choice but to respect what they built. You are the next in that line, not because you read about Stoicism, not because you watched a video, but because you did the one thing that separates the philosopher from the student. You practiced. In silence, without witnesses, without shortcuts. If you stayed until this moment, you are not watching content. You are confirming a decision you already made. The decision to let the old version die. The decision to build in the dark. The decision to walk back into the world as someone who does not owe anyone an explanation for who he became. This channel exists for the men who build in silence. Subscribe. This is where the old self comes to rest, and the new one learns to stand. I will leave you with a final thought. It is not a quote from a philosopher. It is a truth, from the version of you that already exists on the other side of this transformation. He's waiting, and the only thing standing between you and him is the old you's refusal to die. Let him go. He no longer exists,